In 1972, the young university student Kelvin Chin went for a swim at Black's Beach in San Diego, California. Little did he know that he would almost drown, have a near death experience, and that he would save his life thanks to meditation. Let's hear his story.
I had this near-death experience in 1972, summer 1972. So by then I had been meditating, doing TM, Transcendental Meditation, which is what I first learned back in 1970. I'd been meditating for 2 years at that point. And the fact that I was meditating is important to the story. So you'll hear when I tell you the story. So what happened was I was at a summer school program, an intensive language program for whatever, 8 or 10 weeks or something. But the important part of the story is that the university I was going to, the summer program was that it was in San Diego, California. I'd never been to California before in my life. So I was going to the UCSD in La Jolla, California, University of California, San Diego. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. I was going to college up in New Hampshire at Dartmouth College. I'd never been in the ocean on the West Coast. I'd only been to the ocean around Boston and Cape Cod and that part of the ocean. And when I went to California for the summer program, I went to registration. I'm standing at the registration desk and I'm chatting with this girl standing next to me. What was I? I was 21 years old. And I'm chatting with this girl, and she's from Boston also. And she's going to another college around the Boston area in Western Massachusetts. So neither of us have ever been to California before and never been in the Pacific Ocean. And so it's a very hot, warm June day. We finished registration. I said, hey, you want to go to the beach? And she goes, oh, yeah, let's go to the beach. So I'll meet you back here at the registration desk. So we walk down to the beach, and those people who know where UCSD is, it's very close to the ocean. You literally basically walk a half a mile and you're at the beach. And you walk down this driveway and you're at what's called Black's Beach, which is part of Torrey Pines State Park Beach. So it's a very well-known beach. It's a beautiful state park. There's the Torrey Pines Golf Course, which is up on 300 feet up that the PGA Tour plays at and so forth. So we go into the ocean. Now, you got to understand, there's no lifeguards. There's never any lifeguards on that whole beach. And for whatever reason, that hot, nice 2 o'clock in the afternoon, June summer day, there was nobody else on the beach except the two of us. So we were alone on the beach. We go into the water, and, I don't know, maybe I'm hip deep or waist deep in the water or something. And I dunk underwater just to cool off. And she's standing, my friend is standing, maybe she's standing, I don't know, 15, 20 feet away from me. And as soon as I lift my feet up to dunk underwater, I come up and my head's above water and I see there's 300-foot high cliffs at Torrey Pines State Beach. And I see the 300-foot high cliffs starting to go like this. I'm getting pulled out in what I later learned was a rip current, a rip current. So a rip current, for those people who don't know, is basically a river in the ocean. And they're all over the world, but I don't know if there's any rip currents where I grew up in Cape Cod. I don't think there are. And it's a river in the ocean that comes, and they usually come in and then they swoop right along the shore and then they swoop back out into the ocean again. That's what they do. Well, I was getting pulled out in a rip current and I could see these 300-foot high cliffs getting really smaller and smaller. That's how fast I was getting pulled out. I asked a friend of mine who's on my nonprofit board right now, actually, and he has had a career as a merchant seaman, as captain of ships, these big ocean freighters and so forth. And I asked him, I said, Cayman, the 300-foot high cliffs are about 3 or 4 inches high. How far out was I? And he does a quick calculation and he goes, you were 1.7 miles out. I was almost 2 miles out in the ocean in a matter of seconds. I don't know how many seconds. I was panicking. I was freaking out. I wasn't counting seconds, but maybe it was like a minute or something. I don't know, minute or two. I am a couple miles out and I'm swimming in and I'm panicking. And so here's a teaching point for anybody who's watching this and it might save your life or tell your children or your grandchildren. If you get pulled out in the ocean like that from a current of any kind, it doesn't matter what kind it is, don't swim straight back in like I did. You swim at an angle to the beach, because that's going to increase the likelihood you're going to get out of the current that just pulled you out. So I completely forgot that tip, that instruction that I learned in Boy Scouts, because I was panicking and I was just swimming straight back in. And then I'm swimming straight back in and not going anywhere. And I'm getting desperate, and I'm getting physically exhausted, and I'm emotionally getting more stressed out because I think I'm going to drown. I can't get back in. There's no boats. There's no people anywhere. I'm alone out in the middle of the ocean. And so I get so tired just swimming and swimming after about, I don't know how, 15, 20 minutes or something nonstop, and I'm panicking. I start going down in the ocean. And so, it's just like in the movies, the surface of the water's here, and then you see the surface of the water going farther and farther away from you, and then what happened was, so this is where my near-death experience kind of happened. So what happened was, I left my body. The only way I can describe is my mind popped out, so to speak, figuratively speaking, and I'm aware that my mind is out of my body. Now, I willed myself right back into my body quickly, though. Why did I do that, and how did I know to do that? Because I've been meditating for 2 years at that point. If I had not been meditating for 2 years, I probably would have had a more classic near-death experience, which you hear about, you see on YouTube and so forth and so on. You hear people talk about, they go, wow, I'm in this place of light. No, this isn't, I saw Jesus or Buddha or Muhammad or my dead grandmother or this angel or whatever. They have this kind of, oh, wow, gee whiz, a friend of mine calls it. One of my NDE friends calls it the oh, wow, gee whiz experience. It's like you're kind of blown away by the experience. If I had had that experience, the more classic NDE type reaction, I would have been now 20, 30, 40 feet down in the ocean, because my body's still sinking in the ocean. And there's no way I would have gotten up to the surface. I simply would have died. I would have drowned, because that oh wow gee whiz experience lasts at least seconds, and sometimes for many people it lasts minutes. Some people can last hours. I'd be sitting on the bottom of the ocean 100 feet down, drowned, dead. So what happened was, when my mind popped out of my body, I knew exactly what that was, because of the meditation for 2 years, every day, twice a day, I was familiar with my mind being separate from my body, that they weren't the same thing, that they were connected, they influence each other, of course, but they're not the same. And when my mind separated from my body, I'd had that experience before in meditation, and it didn't freak me out. It didn't surprise me. I knew what it was. And so I immediately, split second, willed my mind back into my body. I said, no, back in. And then I struggled the 4 or 5 feet up to the surface. At that point, I'm still sinking down, but I struggled to get to the surface. I got to the surface of the ocean, took a breath, flipped over on my back, and decided I'd just take your time. That's the only thought that I remember. Just take your time. That's what I remember. Take your time. So I instead of, trying to get in fast, I just kept moving as constantly as I could, swimming. I did a lot of side strokes, so I didn't have my head below the water, so I wouldn't worry about, taking in any water by accident, and she said it took me about an hour to swim in. I pulled myself up onto the beach. I passed out. She said I slept for about a half an hour. I was exhausted. But the meditation saved my life, because I recognized when I left my body what was going on, and I willed myself back in. Before that time, I was meditating twice a day, and I would feel unaware of body and surroundings, is the way I would describe it, many times in my meditation. Unaware of my body, unaware of my surroundings, and yet my mind is still awake. I'm not asleep. My mind is aware. That experience I had, in over 2 years, probably 1,000 times, I don't know, 500 times, many hundreds of times, many times. So I was familiar with the unaware body and surroundings experience, and my mind sometimes feeling like it was very, 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 I don't know, distant or very, very huge, very huge and expanded. In other words, when I say my mind distant, meaning my conscious mind was much bigger. So it felt like my conscious mind was not so close, but my conscious mind was close. It was just that my conscious mind is bigger. It's different. It's difficult to describe if you haven't had the experience before. But that familiarity with that is what made me comfortable in that very uncomfortable experience. Comfortable with my mind being out of my body in that very uncomfortable situation of almost drowning. I did not get into meditation for spiritual reasons. It wasn't part of my culture growing up or anything. I grew up religiously Christian Protestant, and my parents were scientists, so they weren't really into spiritual stuff. So I was just very stressed out at college. I was a sophomore, and I needed help, and I was desperate. And I was just literally walking across college campus one day. This is up in New Hampshire at Dartmouth College, and I'm walking across campus, and some guy said to me, "Hey, there's going to be some meditation guy talking about meditation over in the dorm room, whatever, Choate 108 or some dorm room somewhere, whatever. And on Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, if you want to show up." So I just went, and I kind of surveyed several different kinds of meditation, because over maybe a month or two, there were several different, meditation types of meditation. Different teachers were coming around the campuses. So I went into one auditorium one night, and there was a guy sitting there talking about transcendental meditation, TM. But what got me wasn't the name, because I didn't know who Maharishi was. I mean, I knew the Beatles had meditated, but I didn't pay attention like who taught them or anything like that. I was into the music. I wasn't into what they were doing on the side. But what attracted me was the guy on stage. First of all, he wasn't dressed like an Indian, so because I was pre-med at the time, so I wasn't into spiritual stuff. So that attracted me, that he looked like a regular person, number one, in my world, the regular person, And he started talking about about some scientific research, and I went, whoa. I'm pre-med, I'm stressed out. I know what cortisol level is. I know what, too much adrenaline and cortisol and lactic acid. He talked about those three things, and I knew what those chemicals were, hormones, and I knew that I had too much of that in my system. I was very stressed out. And so he was talking about some early research. It was just being started at Boston. The hospital in Boston is no longer there, Boston City Hospital, where research was being done by a Harvard Medical School professor, Herb Benson, who was a cardiologist. And that got my attention. So I learned TM based on that, really based on the research, that hooked me, like, wow, that interests me. I need that. I'm stressed out. I'm anxious. Maybe this will help me. And it did. In 1977, November 1977, I started spontaneously having past life memories. And I didn't even know there were past life memories when they first started happening. My memories go back about 6,000 years, and I have memories of 24 different lifetimes 24, 25, something like that, around 24, 25 different lifetimes, including one as an animal. So my mom died 10 years after that NDE experience, the almost drowning experience. She died in 1982, my third year of law school. It's very suddenly. And she had I have many doctor clients, students of meditation of mine, have taken my class and so forth. And I tell them the story about my mom, and they go, wow, that's amazing that she had that level of cancer in her with no symptoms, asymptomatic. She died so quickly. So it was so sudden how she died. It was a shock to all of us. And I was very close to my mom. And so I was in law school, I don't know, walking down the hallway, at school one day, and somebody asks, you know how people ask, you say, hey, how you doing? And you say, I'm doing okay. Because you don't want to really get into how you're really feeling, because maybe you got to get to class, or you got to get to work, or you just don't want to get into it. You don't want to get into all the emotions that you're experiencing at the time. And I said to the person, I'm doing okay, but my mom just died. Somehow I just threw that in, and it kind of slipped out almost. And he said, wow, your mom died. Wow, I'm so sorry. Oh, my brother-in-law just died in a motorcycle accident in Utah, something. It's like, so it opened up conversation with people. And so people started talking to me more about deaths that they had, grandparents, fathers, mothers, whatever. And people would just start calling me out of the blue. This is like early days of answering machines. Those of you who aren't old enough, we just had regular phones, and some people didn't even have answering machines back then. But people would just call me from around the country. At first, it was just here. Now it's around the world. But back then, it was just around the country. People would call me and say, hey, my friend Ken told me that I should call you because my sister just died, and I wonder if I can talk to you about it. And I just did it for free. It's just like a nighttime and weekends thing. And little by little, maybe once a month or a couple times a month, and then more and more and more and more people would just find me. And so I've been doing that since the 80s. So that's what kind of got me thinking more about death and dying and how to talk to people about it, because I had had so much experience over the decades, little by little, here and there. A half a dozen people here, a dozen people there, another 30 people this year, that kind of thing, just smatterings of people over the decades. I learned what was helpful and what was hurtful to people. My theory, based on my personal experience and my interpretations of my personal experiences, is that our mind, in fact, does continue. When I say mind, people may substitute the word soul or spirit or consciousness or whatever, does continue after we physically, biologically die. And that we go to a place, we could call it heaven or whatever, your culture or religion or belief system calls it. I call it the afterlife. We go to the afterlife and we continue. That's why I call it afterlife. It's after this life, we still living and we continue, but we have an energy body, and it's an identifiable energy body. What do I mean by that? We don't lose our individuality. We don't lose our identity of who we are. We remember who we are, who we were, and we retain that on the other side, but we don't have a biological body anymore. But it's almost like an energy signature. You can recognize and see people, and I've had many experiences now since 1986 with people I've known while they were here on planet Earth, and then now they died on the other side, and I can recognize their energy and so forth and who they are. So that happens on the other side. And what happens on both sides is that we have free will to do whatever we want to do. So we have personal choice on the other side as well as this side. As you know, I help people regardless of what their cultural or religious beliefs are about death and dying. So they could believe in the science belief, which no afterlife, or they could believe in an afterlife. Either way, does not matter. I help people, and I give a free phone session through my nonprofit. I give a free phone session to anybody in the world. They contact me on my website, which you'll put in the description, I'm sure. kelvinchin.org is my website. They can just contact me that way. The grieving process is normal. And culturally, worldwide, we do a terrible job helping people understand that. And it's really important to understand that everybody grieves differently. Everybody's emotions flare up differently when you lose a loved one. I cried during my meditations, AJ, when my mom died. I'd already been meditating for 12 years and I still cried. Why? Because I'm close to my mom. You need to go with the flow of your emotions when you're grieving, and don't judge yourself, and don't listen to other people who say, oh, you should be over. My mom died 40 years ago this November. I'm still sad about my mom not being here to see my children birth and grow up, and to see Now, can she see me from the other side? Yes. And have I had visitations from my mother from the other side? Yes. But is it the same as being able to hug her physically? No, it's not the same. And so the sadness, the grief, it's still real, but I'm not overwhelmed by it anymore. So my message of hope to the people who are grieving just a recent loss of a loved one is that you can move forward and recover is the word that I like to use. We can recover ourselves from the grieving experience, even though we still will never not be sad. We'll always be sad. We may always be grieving, but we will not be overwhelmed by the grief. You will recognize them again. You will be able to identify them. You are greeted by them when you die on the other side. They greet you. And not only that, but people forget that you're not just going to be greeted by your recent family, but by all your other families that you've had in the past, in other lifetimes. But sure, at the head of the line may be your more recent 20th century, 21st century planet Earth family, but many other families as well.